Alright, so back to our HTML and CSS. Now what I'm going to do is under the H1 I just want to put in a paragraph, and in Sublime we can type in the word lorem and tab and it'll give us a bunch of sample text. Alright, we'll reload that just so we have something else to look at. So for the body I'm also going to I'm going to change the font. So let's say font family, and I'm going to say Arial. And then if for some reason Arial can't load, it's going to load what we put here. Let's say Helvetica. And then we're going to do sans serif. Alright, so let's save that and reload, and notice that the font has now changed. Now in CSS you have web safe fonts, and then you have other fonts which you can use. Now web safe fonts means that you don't need to import any kind of special font. You can just use it just like we did here. Alright, if you want to use some kind of specialty font from, let's say, Google Fonts, you'd have to bring that in like you would a style sheet and then apply it. Alright, so let's take a look at some of the web safe fonts. So here's an example of the different font families that we can use, and we don't have to import any kind of special font files or anything. So this is what we use: the Arial, Helvetica, Sans Serif. We also have Arial Black, Bookman Old Style, Comic Sans, Courier, which is kind of like a Microsoft Word type font. Let's see what else. Georgia, Verdana is pretty nice. I like Verdana. I like Tahoma. Times New Roman, which is the default. If you don't apply a font, that's what the default will be in most browsers. And that's pretty much it. So these are the web safe fonts. And when we talk about serif fonts, you can see that the serif fonts have the little hooks on the end here of the letters, and then sans serif is kind of a flat look. Alright, so that's the basic difference between those. I'm not an expert on fonts or anything like that, but I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what's considered a web safe font. Alright, so let's get back to our CSS. I'm just going to make this wrap so that you guys can see everything. We'll just do word wrap. And let's go ahead and let's change the size of the font. So for that we can simply just say font size, and we'll set that to 16 pixels. And if we save and reload, it's going to look the same because that was actually the default. But if I wanted to change this to, let's say, 12 pixels, reload, you'll see it gets much smaller. Alright, now we can also change the font weight from here. So if we say font weight, we can set that to bold and reload, and it'll make everything bold. You can also use numbers like 400. You can change the boldness with the number as well. But we're going to keep this at normal, okay, by default. Now, there's actually a shorter way to do this when you're dealing with these font dash styles here. We can actually just use font, and then we could say normal for the font weight, and then we could do the font family, which would be Arial, Helvetica, sans serif, and then we can just put the font. Actually, let's put the size here. So 16 pixels. Alright, and then if I get rid of these three and reload, we get the same thing. Okay, so it's just a shorter way of doing it. And let me just put a little comment here, and I'm just going to say same as above. Alright, and you know, I'm leaving all this stuff here so you guys have this as a reference. Normally you wouldn't have both of these, but I want you guys to have this if you need it later on. Okay, another common style you'll see within the body is the line height. Okay, now notice that to me these lines look pretty close together, so I'd want to kind of separate them just a little bit. So what I'm going to do here is say 1.6 em or em, and let's save that and reload. And now notice that there's more space in between the lines. All right, that's what line height does. Now em or m is just a unit to use in CSS. It's usually used for more responsive type websites. You could just make this pixels as well. So if we wanted to say 3 pixels for the line height, you'll see that there's only 3 pixels in between, which makes it unreadable. But you can do that. But we're going to stick to em. Usually you'll see m for line heights. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is just add a little bit of HTML over here, some more HTML. So let's go, Actually, you know what we'll do is we'll wrap the h1 and the paragraph in a div, and let's give that a class. We'll give that a class of, let's say, box-1. Okay, so wrap the paragraph and the heading. Okay, we'll push that over a little bit. I don't like how, yeah, I'm just going to make this a little bigger. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between class and ID. Now, as far as the browser goes and enforcing rules, ID and class, really, there's no difference when it comes to HTML and CSS. But what you want to do is you want to think of IDs as elements that are IDs that aren't going to be put anywhere else. They're going to be unique. So for instance, if you have a main nav bar, you might give that an ID of main nav bar because you're not going to be using that main nav bar ID on any other element. But if you're using something like, let's say, class box1, where we're going to give this a background color and a border and stuff, you may use this box1 somewhere else because you may want to apply that style. So it's not unique, so you would use a class. If you had a class that made text red or something like that, you would want to use a class because you may use that somewhere else. So just remember that IDs should always be unique. Classes, you can reuse classes. All right, and if you don't want to follow that standard, I would suggest just always using classes. You'll notice that with frameworks like Bootstrap, they don't use IDs for anything. It's all classes. You just don't want to repeat IDs. That's the bottom line. All right, so we have this div with the class of box1. So let's go ahead and save this, and then we'll go into our styling. And let's see, I'll just make this smaller. So to target a class, we use a dot. So remember, we called it box1, so we're going to say dot box1. All right. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add a background color first of all. So let's say background-color, and let's set it to like almost black, a dark gray, which is going to be 6 times. Now, this is one of those colors where we can use a shortcut. Okay, we can actually use just 3 threes, and it'll give us the same color. All right, so let's save that and reload, and notice that the background is now a dark gray. Oh, one thing I also wanted to do was on the body, I want to zero out the margin, and I'm going to go over margin later on, so don't worry about that, but I'm just going to set margin to 0, and that'll get rid of these spaces around it, okay, except for the top, because headings actually have margin by default. All right, so we have this box1 with a background color of dark gray, almost black. So we want to change the text color because it's almost unreadable. So we're going to say color, and let's set that to white. Now we could do the text white, but I prefer to use hexadecimal, so I'm going to say $, and then 3 Fs, okay, or 6 Fs, whatever you want. Reload, and now the text is white. Now I would like to push everything in from the edges, and you'll see this a lot. Usually with websites, the content will be pushed in. It's not going to go all the way up to the edge. So what we can do is create a class. I'm just going to put it right here, and let's call it container. If you've ever used Bootstrap or other frameworks, you've probably seen this quite a bit. And we can set this to a width. Okay, so for right now, I'm just going to say 500 pixels. All right, and then let's go ahead and save that, and then let's apply that container. So let's wrap it around the box. Actually, I'm going to have this wrapped around everything. Okay, so we'll go down here and put the ending div tag. Let's tab it over. All right, so if we save that and reload, you'll see that it's now 500 pixels wide. Now with containers, like I said, you usually want to push it to the middle. So to do that, we're going to just say margin, and we're going to set it to auto. And what this does is it sets margin, it sets an auto margin on all sides. Okay, it's going to set it to the same on all sides. So let's save that and reload, and it gets pushed over. It puts an even amount of margin on this side and this side. And margin is basically spacing around an element. Now, setting it to 500 pixels, actually, you probably wouldn't see 500. You might see like 960 is a popular width for a website. Okay, something like that. But this makes it so it's not responsive. If I make it smaller, you can see that it's not responsive. It's not adapting correctly. So what we would do is set it to a percentage instead of pixels. So I'm going to set it to 80%. Okay, and then reload, and then as I make it smaller, you'll see that it actually responds correctly to the size. So you for the most part, you want to use percents when you're dealing with containers or something like that. All right, so now let's talk about margin and padding. So a lot of people get confused at first with margin and padding because both of them pertain to space around an element. So I'm going to try to explain that the best I can. So there's something called the box model in CSS, and think of this content block as whatever your element is, whether it's a div or an A tag link or a paragraph, a heading, anything at all. And padding is going to be the space in between that element and its border, okay, its edge. So that padding, you can set the top, the right, the bottom, or the left padding to whatever you want, okay, and it'll add that space. Now the border has to do with the border property, and you're not always going to be using this, but you can set the border width, you can set that to the width, and you can do top right, bottom left, and then margin is going to be the spacing outside of that border. Okay, so just remember, padding is the space inside, margin is the space outside. Now when we're applying styles to, or when we're applying padding and margin, there's different ways to do it, okay? There's the long way and there's the short way. Now, in this example, we're using margin for this paragraph. So we're saying we want the margin top to be 5 pixels, the margin bottom 5, the margin right to be 10, and the margin left to be 10. So if we look at our box model here, it is the top and bottom margin that we want to be 5. So it would be this, and then the left and right would be 10, okay? Now over here we have this same thing in a shorter syntax. So instead of doing margin top, margin bottom, and so on, we can just say margin, and then we can do top, right, bottom, left. Okay, that's what you need to remember: top, right, bottom, left. And you'll see top 5, top 5, right 10, bottom 5, left 10. All right, now to take it a step even to make it even shorter, if the top and bottom are the same and the right and left are the same, okay, such as in this case, top and bottom are 5, left and right are 10, we can do this, and we can say 5 for the top and bottom, 10 for the left and right. Okay, so that's a shorter syntax. And then of course, if they're all equal, you can just do margin 5 pixels, and that'll add 5 pixels around the entire thing. And you can use this same format with padding. You can do padding top, padding bottom, and then same thing over here, you can just use padding. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a border to this just so we can see the difference between padding and margin more clearly. So for box 1 here, let's go ahead and let's say border right. Okay, and we're going to set that to 5 pixels, red. Okay, so it's size, color, and then type or style, which I'll say solid. So let's go ahead and save that and reload, and you'll see that on the right we have a 5 pixel red solid border. Alright, now if we wanted to add borders on other sides, let's say we wanted to do left. Okay, so if I save that, it's going to add it on the right and left, and of course we could do top and bottom. Alright, and that's just going to give it a 5 pixel border around the whole entire thing. Now, just like with margin and padding, there's shorthands. You don't have to do all of this if you want them all to be the same. Okay, so what we could do is we could just say border, and then we could say 5 pixels, red, solid. Okay, and then if we got rid of all of this and saved it, reload, we get the same thing. So this is what you would want to do instead of this. But I'm going to keep it there, again, just so you guys have it. Let's say same as above. Alright, now you can also target specific border properties like the size, the color, and the style.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please like, follow, and subscribe to my channel for more tips, tutorials, and insight about programming. Stay tuned for more content and see you in the next video.